Okay. All right. I think we are live, Katrina.
I think we're live. I'm smiling as if we're live, but you've got the serious look on your
I've got
face.
the serious face. Well, I'm trying to adjust Instagram here. So what are we going to do if we don't get Instagram? But I think I see some eyeballs. So conceptually, those are people that are tuned into this. So here we go. Happy end of 2025. For those of you that don't know, I mean, Katrina, you are like hobbling into this recording here. We are hoping for a quick, a healthy recovery for you, but you had an incident, and
you know what? What I like to say is, this girl is on fire.
yeah, I don't want to sing myself, but more power to you. But yes, grease fire, right? Back of your leg, massive pain. If you tap out,
massive burn. I'll be all right. I'll be all right.
All right. Good. Well, first off, welcome everybody. We did a similar presentation to this a couple of years ago, and in terms of like online on a webinar. And but it's been a hot minute since we've done this. And the reality is, these are some of the teachings that we want to bring inside of our own brokerage to our agents on a regular basis. And we're like, this is a perfect time of year. Let's regroup. This is a great time of year as you're going in. We're in the fourth quarter, getting ready to set all your systems up for what are the things that you're wanting to be tracking in 2026. And if you'll get a running start now at this tracking, it's really going to set you up for success. So we're going to dive in. Any initial thoughts that you have, Katrina, just as we're thinking through, running your business like a business? Yeah, anything that you want to start is fine. But here, I'll let you take it away. You are a numbers queen inside of our business.
In the real estate world, most people get into the real estate world from a job, where they're not necessarily the one responsible for the higher level thinking, the tracking, the business planning. They're responsible for, here's my job, here's what I'm supposed to do. And that transition from an employee to a business person is not one that happens naturally. Yeah. It's an intentional shift that you have to make by choosing, here's what I'm going to concentrate on. And it's also not, it's not one of those things that if you don't do it, the world's going to burn down. You're not going to catch on fire because you're not tracking your numbers. You're not going to have a world where your business is going to go completely sideways. And what I know is that what you track, you can control. And if you are not tracking it, you cannot control it. And so often I'll go to people and they'll say, I'm going to double my business this year. And I'll say, okay, well, tell me about where you got your business from last year. Tell me about all of the numbers. And they're like, I don't know anything from last year. I'm like, how can you possibly know how to double what you did if you don't know how you got where you were? So we need to track our numbers so we know how we get where we are right now, how we got there, so we can get further and further in our business.
Yeah, when we think about like the mindset of a business owner, some people think that the reason they know their business is because their accountant told them you file a business tax return. That doesn't make you a business, right? You're a business owner when you start to track your numbers. And so regardless of where you are in your sales career, we will notice the business mindset shift in when you begin to know your numbers. So this Marcus Lemonis quote right there, right? If you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business. And when we think about why to track, I feel like, Katrina, what I just heard you share, like I see you coach agents inside of the office, and it's really that top thing, right? It's like, okay, you're having this emotional, what could be super good, could be high emotions, could be a low emotions, but either way, you are having this emotional conversation. We want to move to an evidential conversation. And then like, all right, if you want to accomplish this at the end of the year, Gary Keller says it's just a math formula. Once you know your ratios, you can figure out how the end of the year is going to happen. And when you talk to people about like predicting stuff, like what do you say to them?
Everything is math. Everything is math, and the path is in the math. And that what I know is that if we're tracking things, I'll know when you're off standard ratios. So let's say, for example, we're going to talk later about how many appointments you need to have to get to your desired number of closings. And I know that the general standard is about 2, maybe 3 to 1. So if you're going on if you're tracking, I went on 6 appointments, I only got 1 closing. I know we need to work on what's going on in your appointment, but we can't possibly coach to the actual issue without knowing where are you and where are you not.
Yeah. So there you go. So you can't improve what you can't measure. I always start with the pedometer here because Katrina is my hero in so many ways, but the single biggest one is even with a grease fire, she's like, 10,000 steps a day. Do you know how long you've been doing this now?
I calculated it on Monday after the fire. It was 1,393 days. So almost 1,400 days straight. And I'm not doing it to my health detriment. It's actually really good to move my leg as it's healing. But yeah, it's one of those things that you can't, when you're measuring something, it becomes, for me, well, internal and external competition, but that so often we think we're competing against each other. And really what we're doing is we're competing against the goal. We're setting a goal and we're saying, I'm going to beat it. I'm going to hit it. And if you're not measuring it, you have no idea where you are.
Yeah. I mean, listen, obviously, Katrina and I probably skew a little bit towards we are numbers people. We both have a lot of D, even a lot of C on the disc. Katrina definitely has enough I for both of us. But we also realize like it just, if we want to have any sort of increase in performance, like when I go on vacation and there's no scale for several weeks, my health suffers. I could tell you all the things that I'm trying to watch, but the reality is anytime you have something that you are able to measure on a regular basis, you're going to get improvements if you will actually trust and lean on the measurements a little bit. So you can't improve what you can't measure. We have a lot of agents coming to us right now saying, I want to improve my business for next year. And if we start asking you detailed questions about your numbers, this is why. We're not trying to shame you into it. We just want to help you improve your business. So how do we track? Take it away here, Katrina.
Analog before digital. I know there's something about writing down things down. In the book, The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, he talks about if you want to have a new habit, go get a little notepad and write it down. Like everything you eat, you have to like pen to paper. Every dollar you spend, pen to paper. There's something about these digital tracking things that make it so that we don't pay as close attention because it's so automatic. So the idea of it actually should be inefficient to begin with, so you get to know it really, really well. Can QuickBooks automatically allocate your financial transactions? Yes. Is it important at first that you look at every single one? Absolutely. And just like the next one says, the more with technology, the more automated you get, the less you have to think about it. But the more automated you get, the less you have to think about it. So you want to make sure that you're not just allowing technology or even other people. Seth and I have other people who track a lot of things for us. But I would tell you, it's almost the end of the month, and end of this week, beginning of next week, even though we have somebody else closing our books for us, we're going to spend a lot of time looking at that line by line by line, because it's really important that even when you've leveraged it to technology or people, that you spend time with your numbers so you really understand what it's saying.
Yeah, and I would just invite anybody, feel free to throw comments in the chat, anything you want us to talk more about, for sure. But this whole idea of like analog to digital, we love technology. We love it. We love automations. We love Zapier. We love Zaps. We love API Nation. We love it when things move quickly. The challenge is sometimes it ends up moving way too quickly for us. And we will wake up one day and be like, oh, look, all those reports function perfectly. And then we'll look at the numbers. We're like, we haven't actually looked at these numbers in a long time. And when we get back into the habit of looking at the numbers, and sometimes we get back into the habit by making it go analog, we take ourselves back into the dark ages. And you would look at us and you'd say, you're being super inefficient. You're absolutely right. We are, because we need to get back to tracking it manually. I just maybe made the mistake. I wonder if Laura will watch this. Laura Daly, my little daughter in Australia, I love you. And if you watch this, Laura, when we were making you track the expenses manually every single day, you were tracking them at a higher level. And then the moment that we had Nicole build an amazing spreadsheet to make it all input effortlessly, the tracking reduced. That's an example of like go from analog to digital. So there you go. By the way, to make entry automated, make entry automated, make review purposeful. To make it purposeful, make it verbal. What in your life are you wanting to be more purposeful about with your numbers, and who are you going to verbally be talking about that with? Katrina, anything come up for you? Like, I mean, I'm thinking of our team meetings or leadership meetings, L10s, where it's like, all right, the numbers are there. Anybody could just go read them, but let's actually have a verbal conversation.
I think the thing that comes to mind most recently is, for those of you who don't know, my husband is a health and fitness coach. He can help you lose weight and hit your health and fitness goals. And about 5-6 months ago, he's like, I'm not hitting my own goals, his own goals. And it's because he had shifted from having a health and fitness coach to just having a business coach. And he said, you know what I really need is I need both. I need not only somebody holding me accountable on the business side, but even though I'm the coach, I know what I need to do in order to get there. I need someone who is weekly asking me where I am with that. So Seth and I, every Monday, we have multiple meetings, and then those meetings, numbers get reported from multiple businesses. And sometimes that's painful. But the pain is something people are more likely to run away from pain than towards pleasure. So if you have to have the pain of saying, hey, I said I was going to have 10 appointments last week and I had 2, when you have to say that out loud, you're not going to say that out loud that many times before you change your behavior.
Yeah. So I'd say 2 things. One, if you run a team, if you're on here and you manage anybody, you run a team of any sort, I would ask the question of, in what way do you have verbal conversations about the stuff that you're tracking? And if you are a solo agent on here, or you're new in your career, you're like, I don't have a big team, I don't have that. You can find someone to be accountable to with your numbers. And one of the greatest ways to do it is find somebody you can be verbally accountable to talk them through numbers that are on a page, not just verbal, but it's verbal in addition to the tracking. So there you go. All right. What do we track? Let's start to dive into this stuff. So 4 main categories we'll talk about. I think it'll be kind of front loaded a bit, but we'll cover a little bit of all of them. Lead generation activities, real estate production activities, financials, and life goals. And then Katrina, there's this comment about lead indicators versus lag indicators. Like, give everybody kind of a general overview of that.
Yeah, the lag indicators are usually what we talk about when people say, how's business going? Say, hey, yeah, I had 4 settlements this month. And that is a lag indicator. Right now is October. If you and I wanted to make more money in the month of October, there's absolutely nothing we could do in the real estate world to make that happen, by and large. There's nothing that can happen. So it can be a artificially encouraging number or an artificially discouraging number.
Exactly.
So while it's important to know those numbers, you need to back it all the way back up to the thing that is the leading indicator, which is the thing over which you have control. Each and every one of us have control over our activities of what we do today. Are we lead generating? Are we having the conversations that we need to have to set the appointments that we need to have? And it's important to measure all of them, but not focus too much on the lag, focus more on the lead, because that would then again be not, you can have that consistency will get you to a consistent lag number, and it's not artificially encouraging or discouraging. I will say on this slide though, most people that I know, if they're tracking any of it, it's that second bullet point that's like, hey, I sold 5 houses, but they don't know how they got there. They don't know how much profit they made, and they don't know where they're going.
And I think you nailed it when you said it can be artificially too encouraging or artificially discouraging. And it's like, they don't know what success looks like, because success is when you're planting the seeds. You're seeing a forest one day. And for anybody who's like in the midst of like, oh, I'm having a good month, but then 2 months later, you have no transactions at all. It's feast or famine. That's because you're focusing on lag indicators instead of focusing on every day hitting your lead generation activities.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right. So what do we track? Here's an interesting metaphor for everybody, right? So you got a plane cockpit on the left, and then you have this tip that says your 6-pack. What are the metrics, not to be confused with Jason's 6-pack, different 6-pack, Katrina. What are your metrics that matter more than any other? So here's the idea. You've got this plane cockpit. There's a ton of dials you could look at. There's a ton of things inside of your business that you could look at. But in a plane, you talk to a pilot, they're like, there's 6 that matter more than anything else. I don't know what the 6 are. Go talk to a pilot. But there's 6 that matter more than anything else. And the question is, inside of your business, what matters? So here's some of the things that we focus on when we think about the metrics that matter more for us than anything else. So let's first talk about kind of the referral-based approach, which is really where most of our stuff has come from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, everything you see on here, these are all leading indicators that we're measuring. They're lead generation activities. So calls and voicemails, your notes, Popeye is not Popeye the Sailor Man. It's, stopping by someone's home, leaving them something, having coffee, breaking bread with somebody, having a client event. We have a client event coming up right before Thanksgiving. That was one of mine and Seth's favorites. We get to sponsor our favorite people's Thanksgiving dessert, and we get to hang out with our favorite people and touch base with them about real estate, which helps us to build our business. It's a win-win for everyone involved. So the fact is, with all of those things, you need to be doing multiples, at least 36 of each of these with your people per year. 36 times you need to touch them in order to get to the point that you are having some of those ratios that you want to have. So how are you doing that? You also want to make sure that you're tracking the people who are not showing up, the people who are not coming to your parties, the people who are not answering your calls, because that gives you a different pulse on your business as well.
Yeah, and I think if there was one on there that we'd probably look at more than anything else, we would talk about calls or voicemails. My struggle with when generationally, even when people are like, well, I'm doing all my stuff through social media. Okay, fine, no problem. Are you tracking that? Are you tracking like how many people you engage with every day, or are you just saying, yeah, I spend an hour on social media a day? That's where I think you've got a concern. And so the number one thing that we would track is how many phone calls, how many conversations are we having with current, past, future clients? And if there's somebody that we know, then we find that the voicemail has about as much impact as the call. If it's not somebody that we know, frankly, we found that metric to not be as helpful. A good rule of thumb, until you know exactly what your numbers are, is think about this. For every 50 of those calls, voicemails, or meetings face-to-face, pop by, seeing somebody face-to-face, or grabbing coffee or whatever it might be, 50 to 2. If you get 2 referrals for every 50 of those touches, you'd be in good shape. And then that number below that says 421. Maybe we cover this more later. I'm actually not sure. Do we? Okay, then we'll wait on that. Anything else you want to say on this?
That piece that you're mentioning about social media, there are things that you can do that are intentional and are tracking in there. The idea of like, oh, I just posted on social media, so that's my lead generation, that you're deluding yourself into thinking you're going to get business out of that. And the things that you can track are, I had two-way communication. All of these things, by and large, are things that make an impact on the relationship. So a handwritten note makes an impact on the relationship. Two-way communication makes an impact on the relationship. So I'm going to be intentional. I am going to respond to 10 people's posts. And when they then respond to me, that's a two-way communication. I'm going to DM this many people. And when they respond to me, that's two-way communication. I would count two-way communication on social media in that 50, but simply I posted and hopefully people saw it. That is, that's hope. And we don't run businesses on hope.
Yeah. So there you go. I think we might have some examples in here as we get on of what some of that tracking looks like, at least for us. So what's your database worth? What is your database worth? Take the amount of your GCI last year that came from your database. Here's a good exercise for everybody, especially if you've got some experience in the business. If you're brand new, there's going to be less relevance because you have less data to track. But take the amount of gross commission income that you had last year from your database and look at the number of people in your database. By that, you would figure out what is the value of each person, right? You just divide those numbers. But here's another way to think about it. How many people do I really have in my database? So here's one of the ways that we did it over time. We would take the number of transactions that we did from our database, and let's say that number was 30 or 40 or 50. And we might say, well, we have 1,000 people in our database. That's true. But if we said, well, we had 50 transactions from that 1,000 people, we would say, you know what, take 50, add a 0 to it, 500. We would say, we think that there's 500 people inside of the 1,000 people that we are interacting with at a more personalized level. And then the answer is not to go find another 1,000 people if you want to double your business. The answer is simply to take that 1,000 that you already have and be in better communication with them. So take how many transactions you had from your database last year, add a 0 to it, and look down at your number and be like, that is probably the number of people that you are intentionally touching on a more regular basis than others. Any tweaks you'd make to that math, Katrina?
Yeah, I know that math is absolutely perfect. And on the other side, for somebody who's newer and thinking, how do I get there? It's take the number of transactions you want to do, add a 0 to that. And that's your goal for the number of people in your database by December 31st. We have 60 days before the beginning of the year. And if you have that number of those people in your database by December 31st, you're far more likely to hit that number.
Yeah, absolutely. So cold lead generation activities, right? If you're out there, maybe you're focusing on open houses, maybe you're doing telemarketing, you're dialing for dollars. These are some of the metrics that when we have ISAs, inside sales agents, from time to time, we will focus on in terms of those numbers. The amount of time spent the amount of dials that they conducted in that time, right? Which changes if you're using an automated dialer that's dialing 3 lines at once or a single line dialer, the number of conversations held. And then from the conversations, we're looking at 2 things. The amount of nurturing conversations, right? There was a positive conversation and it's going to go somewhere in the future. And it kind of goes into a bucket of, I'm going to stay in touch with this person at a regular level because the conversation went well. We call that a nurture. And the number of appointments set. But there's an image on the screen of a Katrina, I don't even know if you ski. This is a ski.
I went skiing once, never
okay,
again.
All right, y'all. I love skiing. This is a ski app called Slopes. If you ski, I'm curious to know if you have this. What's fascinating about this is this tracks a day of skiing. But what happens at the end of the day, if you got on a ski hill and you start runs at 8:30 in the morning and you end at 4:30, that felt like a work day, right? So there's 8 hours of skiing. But at the end of the day, this thing does what a lot of apps will do at the gym now, which is it'll actually measure time under tension. Katrina, since you're married to a fitness coach, are you familiar with this idea of time under tension?
I am not, actually.
Okay, all right. So perfect. All right, so y'all, you went to the gym yesterday. How long were you at the gym? You were at the gym for an hour. You were working out in your basement for an hour. Time under tension is how much time your muscles were actually under tension. And if you were actually measuring that, much like this app would for skiing, you would find that if you were out skiing for 8 hours, you might have actually only been working for like an hour of those 8 hours. The rest of the time, you're going up the chairlift, you're drinking hot chocolate in the lodge, you're doing everything except for actually time under tension skiing down the mountain. And this is what I spot with agents, right? How's business? I'm so exhausted. I feel like I'm working so hard. Well, how's lead generation going? I'm at the office for hours just lead generating. And then we walk around and we're like, do you realize how much time you spend at the coffee machine, getting a cup of coffee, chatting with people? How many calls did you actually make? So the actual amount of time is not the 4 hours you blocked for lead generation. It's if you added up the minutes of every dial, what would it be? So what do you notice, Katrina, now that I've explained it, what do you notice when you talk to agents about this?
This reminds me a lot of what Jeb Blount talks about in fanatical prospecting, that he went into an organization where they were not hitting their numbers that they needed to hit. And everybody was on the phones for 3 hours a day, just hitting the phones, dialing, and they weren't hitting the numbers that they needed to hit. And when he actually studied it, he found they felt like they were lead generating for 3 hours, but they weren't. So they're feeling exhausted without getting the results. And what he says in that is that your lead generation, you should set up a 45-minute block that you're going to do nothing but lead generate. You're going to dial, talk, hang up, dial, talk. You might be using a dialer, all of that. You're not even pausing it to be like, oh, let me take those notes. You're keeping handwritten notes so that you can kind of have enough of it to take your notes afterwards. And when he shifted that organization from 3 hours to 45 minutes, the results doubled. And it's because they were intentional about it. And I think so often we think we need to have all of this time. And I would encourage you to think less about the time and more to think about, in this particular framework that we're talking about, the number of conversations and the number of nurtures.
Yeah.
Because if you say, I need to have 10 conversations to get 4 nurtures to set one appointment, okay. Now you can back up to how many dials you need to have on that. But the amount of time it takes to make 100 dials could be an hour or it could be 5 hours, depending on who you are and how distracted you get.
Yeah. Interestingly, I think that if you are spending a lot of time in your mind lead generating, this is crazy. If you're not getting results, my advice would actually be shorten the amount of time you're doing it. Mm-hmm. I would, when people tell me, oh, I spend 2 hours a day lead generating, I'm just not getting results. Invariably, I'm like, I don't think they're actually time under tension. I think they're just, they're looking on social media at the client's profile, and then they're going to watch some random video. And then finally they're getting around to calling them. And so, yeah, they talked to the client, but they did a little bit of research first and they thought they were lead generating. It was a bunch of wasted time. I would rather you have 30 focused minutes. You show me any real estate agent that is spending more than an hour of solid time under tension lead generating, highly, highly successful business at those levels.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So again, we talked about some other metrics that we track. These are just some examples, right, of like an email sequence. We would track things like what percentage were open, click-through rate, so on and so forth. We would look at BombBomb. I don't even think we use BombBomb anymore, but I loved their tracking for this of how many emails went out with video emails, how many videos were watched that were sent out, things of that nature. Social media, right? Number of followers, post engagement, new followers. I would focus on new followers in some ways more than I'd focus on anything else. Is there any other tracking that you would see for social media that was a big focus for you?
Tracking can be a challenge with social media. So I think, again, getting back to that analog of how many one-on-one conversations, how many one-to-one interactions you've had, and all of this kind of covers most of the things that you can track overall.
Yeah. So now let's shift gears to sort of what are almost the more lagging indicators, right? I mean, we're moving from lead generation into the lagging indicators. And if we were to ask somebody, hey, how's your year going? And somebody just rattled off their numbers, these would be the types of numbers that we would be looking at, right? How many of you closed? How many do you have under contract? How many active listings do you have? How many coming soon listings do you have? Right. So that kind of be on the listing side. And then Katrina, what else do you add on the buyer side or other questions related to listings?
Active buyers, people who are actively searching, and then other people in the pipeline who you think are going to settle this year. If I ask someone that question right at this moment at the end of October, that last category shouldn't have anyone in there. If they're not active listing, coming soon listing, or an active buyer, they're not settling this year. Right. The key with this is what do you need to have in your pipeline in order to hit your goals? So let's say you want to close 100 deals next year. If you on March 31st, you look down at your numbers and you say, okay, all of that closed, under contract, active, coming soon, active, and other pipeline, that's 70 or more, you will be on track to hit that goal. That goes up as the year goes on. People will say, what do you mean? I need to have 100% in my pipeline by the end of June. Yeah, you do. Because yes, there are going to be people who enter your pipeline after June 1st and settle before the end of the year. But there's also people in your pipeline at the end of June who are going to exit the pipeline for whatever reason. And people will feel really, really confident because at the end of June, they're like, I got 50% of my production closed in my pipeline, and it's halfway through the year. And they're very far behind because these here, again, they're those lagging indicators. They're those lagging indicators of things that we cannot control at the same level, that if somebody is at 50% by the end of June, they're going to need to redouble their efforts significantly in order to come close to their goal by the end of the year.
Yeah, and remember, this does not mean, of course, that they have to be closed or even under contract, right? Active listings count, coming soon listings count, but coming soon listings are the same thing as an active buyer. They're just, we're not there yet. But
coming soon can be deceptive for people in the state of Maryland because that's an actually status in our MLS. Right. What we mean by this is Seth and I were just talking about a seller we're representing that's going to go on the market in January. We took exterior photos this week, so it would be green when they go on the market, and they would be counted as a coming soon, even though they're not in the MLS. So this is really people who are, they've signed the paperwork, they're getting the house ready, they're going to be coming on the market in the next 60, 90, 120 days. It's just there's some timing issues there. It's not necessarily they're in a specific status in the MLS.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, continuing on with some of these things, right? Metrics that we use, and what I would say is we're trying to go through these in order. If you're already at a slide that you're not tracking something that we've already talked about, one, email us. We'll send you all these slides. Go back and watch this. But we're giving them to you in the order that they absolutely matter. But now we're walking through kind of the whole pipeline that we would use when we're thinking about lead conversion for buyers, lead conversion for sellers, and all the mile markers. By the way, the one in bold there, appointments held and closings. If I could kind of only pick two, appointments held would absolutely matter, as would closings. But the rest of them, you'll see this sort of gradation, a funnel as it'll draw closer. So with buyers, referrals received. How many buyer referrals have we received? We've run a predominantly strong referral-based business. I would care way more about referrals received than the number of people that came into the open house. It's going to be more of a predictor. But then the great equalizer is appointments held. I don't care how the lead got to me. It doesn't matter if it was a sign call, an open house, or referral. If I get 10 of those in aggregate and 5 of those hold an appointment, or we'll say 6 of those hold an appointment, I can really trust that from 6 appointments, there's going to end up being 3 closings from that. And if your numbers are stray, if you're way better than 3, awesome. Please run a webinar. I want to come on your webinar. If you're way worse than 3, there's something happening with your consult that we'd want to talk about. Then agency signed. How many of those appointments that were held decided to sign agency? Not all of them will, but the majority will. Of those, how many went to an active search? How many of those started to write offers? How many of those went under contract? And how many of those went to closing? So you see that tip, 2 appointments to 1 closing. And then where we say 4, 2, and 1 is for every 4 referrals we receive, we figure 2 of those 4. So 50% of those will turn into an appointment. And of every 2 appointments we have, we assume 1 of those will turn into a closing. What about the listing side, Katrina?
It's really the same thing. It's the same thing. You're focused on most of the same numbers, just with a couple of tweaks in the middle. A coming soon listing is like an active search. An active on the market is somebody who's writing offers. We all know, depending on your market, a buyer might need to write multiple offers. You're shifting to active on the market on the listing side. But beyond that, it's the same. Appointments held to closings, you should be at about a 2 to 1. And if you're not, again, that's something to investigate in your business, because that's the overall ratio that we've studied over time. And I want to double click on something Seth said about appointments held being the great equalizer. Yeah. Because if you've got multiple different types of lead generation, you might be like, well, how do I actually track the numbers in a way that makes sense when I'm doing Zillow leads and referral-based business? What you do is you track all of the things ahead of it and figure out how many above that do you need to, how much of that do you need to sit an appointment. But an appointment definition is also important. An appointment definition is a needs analysis with the client. Somebody who's doing cold internet leads, Zillow leads, and meets someone at the house and calls that an appointment, they're going to skew their numbers significantly.
Yeah.
Making sure that, and what is an appointment is actually an appointment. We can, again, delude ourselves to thinking where I had 20 appointments. Nope. You had 20 conversations, but you needed to, if it's not a needs analysis, it's not an appointment.
Yeah. Don't get us started on this. As my kids lock in here. Katrina and I run a call almost every morning, but between the 2 of us, we run a call almost an hour long. By the way, if somebody wants to hop on that isn't on, let us know. We'll give you a guest pass. But I can promise you that one of the conversations that comes up repeatedly, it might come up tomorrow, is this. When somebody tells me, hey, I just did a buyer consult with this person. Awesome. Tell me about it. Well, they were driving and I was driving. So it was a 15-minute phone call, but that was a buyer consult. You're going to skew your numbers. And almost every bad thing that happens in a real estate transaction, we find that we could trace back to a poorly done consultation. Well, either on the listing side or the buyer side. If you're shortcutting right there, it's going to impact all of your numbers in a really negative way.
And the purpose of that call is to get that, to actually set an appointment. I find too many people to actually reduce their chances of having a real appointment by having a fake appointment.
Yeah. I don't know who to give a nod to on this, but I think I'm going to pick Steve Schlueter. I think Steve Schlueter is the first guy that I ever heard say the words, be the local real estate economist of choice when consumers ask, how's the real estate market? And so here would be some of the things that you'd want to know, just numbers wise. You'd find these, everybody's market's different. We got people here from around the country. But the reality is we've all got stats in our market, right? Do you know the average sales price of macro and also micro markets where you are? Do you know the average sales price? Do you know if that average sales price is appreciating, going up from where it's been, or depreciating? And we're in a market right now where you're going to see mixes of both, and they're going to be done hyper locally. Average days on market. We are right now in a season where if you got your license in the past several years, certainly since 2020, you're shocked at average days on market going up. Now, this has been happening for a couple of years in most markets, but the reality is there's a lot of agents right now that think that if something hasn't sold in a couple of weeks, there must be something wrong with them. And what's worse than that is that their clients think there's something wrong with them. Average days on market is something that shifts over time, and it's just something to be aware of. Month supply of inventory, absorption rate. If you don't know how to calculate absorption rate, reach out to one of us. We're happy to walk you through it. Katrina, I'm pretty sure you have a super awesome nerdy video.
I have a super awesome nerdy video on this. I don't know that it's on YouTube yet, but I'll make sure it's on my YouTube channel by the end of the day. But yeah, I have a super awesome nerdy video. It's just basically saying if absorption rate is if nothing else came on the market of what's on the market right now based upon last month's closings, how long would it take for those houses to go away? Super simple calculation. And you hear that all the time when they say we're short on inventory. We only have a month of inventory. That's what they're talking about. It would take 1 month for all the houses to go away.
And then we're constantly tracking average list price to average sales price ratios. People get that wrong all the time. They'll tell success stories of the deal that they got, or the discount, or what they got as a percentage of list price, and then they're not tracking the list price to sales price ratio from the original. They might be tracking after a reduction or things like that. So when somebody says, "Hey, do you think I can get a discount on this price?" If you're not checking to see what its original list price was, or when they just made a price adjustment, you're going to get these numbers wrong. And there's speaking of nerdy, there's a super nerdy tip here. Average can be the mean, the median, and the mode. That just means that when you see the word average, or you hear people talking about, there's 3 different ways that they could mean average. The one that you would naturally think about is let's put it this way. If one house took a day to sell, and another house took a week to sell, and another house took a year to sell, and you go to the Wall Street Journal or your economist source of choice, and you say, what was the average days on market? The average in that story would have been 4 months, because there's 3 houses. You add up a week plus a day plus a year. It's just a little over a year. On average, that would be 4 months. But the reality is 4 months is a completely unhelpful statistic for you to give any advice to a client in that story. Because what you would actually want to tell somebody is, listen, if you're on the market longer than a week, there's a 2 out of 3, there's a 66% chance you won't ever sell. 2 out of 3 properties sold within a week. That's what we want to tell a seller. And it's just a misunderstanding of how statistics actually work.
Yep.
Super nerdy. All right. Financial tracking. Let's move on a little bit. Financial tracking. So what would we want to be tracking? Gross commission income less cost of sales equals team company dollar. Now, the company dollar is a phrase that most sales agent, we certainly didn't really understand this concept until we started to run a brokerage, right? But it's a really helpful way to understand the great equalizer, whether you run a really big team or a smaller team. Once you subtract out the cost of sales, which is sure money that you're paying to the brokerage that you're with, but also money that you're paying out to team members, and money that you're paying out in referral fees to other agents around the country that have sent you leads. That gives you your team company dollar. If your business is heavy on relocation, or maybe you're paying out a lot of referrals out to Zillow, Dave Ramsey, whatever it might be, you're skewing your numbers if you don't think about what is team company dollar. Where do you go from there, Katrina, when you're meeting with agents talking about their numbers?
I will tell you that one of the biggest pitfalls with agents and tracking their financial numbers is understanding that category of cost of sales. Yeah. And a big part of why they don't understand it is because they work with an accountant and a bookkeeper who doesn't understand real estate. So they have a P&L done for them to have their taxes done, and their bookkeeper pools whatever check was entered into their bank, whatever direct deposit happened, whatever check they cashed. It was a $5,000 check. So they said they have $5,000 worth of income. And the fact is the GCI was higher than that. Let's say very simple math, they're on a team with a 50-50 split. The GCI was 10,000. The cost of sales was 5,000, and the actual team company dollar was 5,000 in that situation. And most bookkeepers who are not familiar with real estate are not tracking it that way. And because I know, Seth, you're a CPA, I have an MBA, the vast majority of realtors do not have an accounting background. So they don't know any differently. So understanding that. The other side, though, I see people who say, well, my listing photos, that's cost of sales. The fact is, cost of sales is money that comes out of the commission only if closing happens. So that referral fee that gets paid to the agent somewhere else, that portion that gets paid to the team member, that only happens, the transaction fee that you're paying to your transaction manager, that only gets paid at closing. That's how cost of sales. But the things that are paid no matter what, your signs, your photos, your brochures, that's marketing expenses on the other side, not cost of sales. So if you're an agent who's thinking about tracking your finances, this is a really great time to sit down and think about, okay, How am I going to make sure I'm tracking this differently in 2026? And knowing that these three things are the top line before you get down into your expense side.
Yeah. So then for us, once we get kind of the team company dollar, we think about our expenses in a few different categories, right? So there's fixed expenses. Your MLS fees are a fixed expense. It's going to be the same. I mean, they're going to go up, but it's going to be the same every year, right? And any sort of monthly subscriptions you have, et cetera, those are going to be fixed expenses. Variable expenses might change. You get a whole bunch of listings, you got a whole bunch of listing photos to pay for, on and on and on. Those are going to be variable expenses. That's going to give you your net income, right? So team company dollar minus your fixed expenses and your variable expenses, net income. Then we have a line here called owner's expenses. And this is important, especially if you are an agent, that honestly, if we looked at your numbers, we'd be like, hey, you had a pretty good year. Why are you so down? And if you're like, man, real estate it's way too expensive, that all my costs are out of control. What we've often found is it's not actually the expenses of your business that's out of control. It's the lifestyle that you live that you think that you can write off. And so you now start to call it a business expense. So there's a phrase called above the line and below the line expenses. And Katrina, how would you explain when you see an agent that is like, they're discouraged about their expenses when the reality is, nah, you just are living a pretty good life and you're trying to write it all off?
Yeah, what we tell Uncle Sam is we absolutely want to live in a world where we're running our business as a business, and that we are reducing our tax liability with legal tax write-offs. All of these things are legal. And actually, I'm going to talk about you, Seth Bailey, because I remember the time that this kind of came forefront for me is that I was being held responsible for the net income of the team, holding expenses accountable. And that particular year, Seth decided to join Tony Robbins Platinum Partners. And Tony Robbins Platinum Partners is a very expensive thing. Is it a business expense? Absolutely. Did our businesses improve and go up? All of the things because Seth invested in all of the education that came with that, for sure. And if Seth were to say to me, hey, this business isn't profitable the way that it needs to be, and I need you, so you're not going to make as much money, is that fair to Katrina? Because Seth chose the personal growth that was very expensive. No. So that became
not at all. It was not at all fair to Katrina, for the record.
Right. So that becomes then an owner's expense. So that you're Katrina, or when you're holding your business accountable to your net income, you're holding it accountable to those actual expenses. But guys, there's 1,000 different ways that we can work with a really talented CPA to reduce tax liability that you should not count as the thing that made your business unprofitable.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, there you go. All right. So some random trying. Is there anything? Geez, now we just have a spreadsheet on here. I'm trying to think if there's anything on here that we want to show.
It's kind of busy. It's hard to read.
A lot.
I think what I would say here is you should have a dashboard for your financials. And this kind of all goes into okay, so what's the GCI closed? What's the cost of sales? What's coming out? But from the different categories, and really measuring ourselves against the goal. And we can probably go into this deeper.
I think the only comment, I'm going to make two quick comments on here. Number one, referral fees. You guys can't even see the number on here. Doesn't really matter. But referral fees, I love tracking outbound referral fees. Y'all, if you are not talking to your database and trying to find people inside of your SOI that want to move anywhere else in the country, and if you are not posting on social media telling them, that if you're moving anywhere, I have a network of agents that can help you. That is like the easiest money you will ever make inside of your business. And that was a number that we track as a line item on purpose. The only other comment I'll make is this. When I think about average, I look at average sales price on the listing side and the buying side. These are not too different, but then I look at average commission income on listing side and buying side. And this is one of those areas that I actually think we're going to see even more of a shift as time goes on, because the agents that are predominantly listing agents, which is to say, yes, you bring in referrals or you've got lead generation strategies, but when you find a way inside of your business to message and focus more on the listing side, Gary Keller and many others would say, you list to last, but you also in the listing process, you've got a major focus on you have an ability to increase your income because you're one of the first ones to have the conversation about what you charge. Does that now happen because of changes last year on the buyer side? Absolutely. And we are still watching some buyer side commission drop because agents are not comfortable having that conversation.
And we're also seeing some buyer side commissions go up.
Yeah.
Because there's people are asking about it and they're having a different conversation. And this is, again, don't allow the things you cannot control to control the things you can.
Yeah.
You can control your level of skill in conversation.
So I just had a coaching call yesterday with somebody where we almost covered this chart. And again, really small print on here. We'll give you kind of the too long didn't read version of this. When we think about income inside of our business, we actually take the income and it's almost like a cost accounting move where we think about like a transaction as this widget going through an assembly line. And we kind of eyeball and we come up with a few percentages for the different parts of a process where I think this is super relevant. If you are an agent that is, you're gaining success in your business and you're actually getting to a point where you're running out of time more, and time is sort of becoming this commodity. There's an opportunity to think about the transaction, not of, oh, I don't have time to work with this client. The reality is I have time to work with every client. But I don't do everything for every client. So there's parts of the process that I retain and parts of the process that I don't. And we do that by thinking about parts, the transaction by role. So what you can't probably read here is what was the source of the lead? Who spent time converting the lead? Who conducted the consult? Who did the showings? Who did the contract? And over time, what we would find is that we would have part of the process handled by somebody else on our team or outside of our team. And then we would handle the parts that make the most difference. Any simpler way that you'd explain that for people?
I was coaching an agent through this recently who's feeling super overwhelmed with just all of the time required to conduct real estate. And we identified that showing properties was the biggest thing that was requiring time, and said, okay, so how do I figure that out? Said, you need to hire a showing assistant. But by looking at it in this manner, we were able to say, okay, if you had a showing assistant last year and they were the ones, they showed every property for you and you showed none of them, you would have made $50,000 less in GCI and they would have made $50,000. Is that a job that somebody would want?
Yeah.
Yes, that is a job that somebody would want. And do you think that if you had all of the time back that you had from showing properties and you devoted that to going out and finding more buyers and sellers, that you would make back that 50 grand and now that person will make more money as well? And when the answer to all of that was yes, it was a no-brainer of go out and hire a showing assistant.
And if you've read the book, Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell, you could have even looked at that number and said, could I live without that 50,000? Would I literally want to buy back my own time? Because you actually know, if you look at that, you're like, hey, would somebody want to take on that role for that percentage? And would that be successful for them? And if the answer is yes, then you're literally buying back your time. There's going to come a point in all of our businesses where what we want is more money and we need a plan to get there. We've covered a lot of the metrics on that. And this, you're starting to get almost into the metrics of when you want to get more time, how do you get that? So there you go. All right, next thing. Oops, other way. Next thing, we talked about tips, tracking your income by source. I think we got this from Lars Hedenberg, I believe, out of North Carolina. Awesome guy. And I'm like, man, I thought I was nerdy, but this guy had like this Dewey Decimal System. I thought it was so impressive. So we started tracking almost by numbers all of the different lead sources that we had. And we did it so that we didn't just like one day type in sphere of influence and the next day type in SOI, right? It was a really clear drop down, and we would track all of our income by source. It got to be where once we started to do this, if you look at all your business last year and you don't know the source of all of it, how are you possibly going to make good decisions on where to invest your lead generation time and money this year?
Yeah, and it just gives you more insight, because a lot of people will say sphere of influence, but when they're not tracking actually your sphere using you versus a referral. I was talking about this with an agent the other day who is really, really good at getting the people she knows to work with her. She's not nearly as good at getting the people she knows to give her a referral. So that's a gap in her business. She doesn't need to add anyone else to her database to increase her business. She needs to be more intentional about asking for referrals and teaching people how to refer her.
So huge. So huge. Okay. So more business financial stuff. Business budget. If you want a general rule of thumb, use page 157 of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent to give you some ideas. 30% cost of sales, right? That was that broker, team splits, etc. 30% expenses, and 40% profit. The reality is this: as you're a newer agent, your expenses aren't quite 30% yet. And as you're a more experienced agent, your profit isn't quite 40% if you're starting to get out of production. But this is a really good rule of thumb to use as sort of a middle ground inside of the business. And then months of reserves. If you don't have a month of reserves, if you don't have 3 months of reserves, if you don't have 6 months of reserves, make a goal of what your reserve numbers, what you want to increase those to in 2026. There's so many times we will watch people come into a business that it requires nothing for us all to get our real estate license. And so we think as a result that investing money or having reserves in our business is just an unnecessary thing. The reality is any strong business person would think about a business as something that they fund from their reserves or their investment so that the business itself can grow. Any other comments you want to make?
And while we're not talking about personal things here as much, personal reserves as well, kind of very timely right now where we have a lot of government workers who aren't getting a paycheck.
Yeah.
And they're going to get, it's a very much so like real estate. What a government workers are experiencing right now is like real estate. We're like, I don't have any settlements lined up for the next 60 days. I'm not going to get paid. But then at the end of the 60 days, you might have 4 settlements. So you're going to get paid a lot of money. And having those reserves makes it so that you're not going into debt when you've got a month or 2 that is a little bit of a dry spell. You have that money so that you can live on it for when those dry times do come.
Yeah. And there's kind of, you can't really see this number here, but there's kind of this sweet spot of it about 300,000 in GCI where expenses end up being the lowest. And so a 60% profit margin. And then it kind of tapers off from there as a team gets bigger. The number gets bigger, but the percentage gets a little bit smaller as well. Here's probably this, if we were going to distill everything we think about the MREA finances down, for us, it's sort of this one metric. We think about salaries and lead generation as accounting for about 25% of the GCI. So it doesn't actually matter if you go invest your money on Zillow, on ads, on Facebook ads, on print marketing, or if you hire people to help you run a referral-based business. But if you're not thinking of if you said, I'm making $300,000 this year, taking 25% of that and investing it in a combination of salaries or leverage, team leverage, or lead generation, those are the 2 numbers. The way it actually works out in the book is about 10 to 15% for lead generation and about 10 to 15% for salaries. And so we combine those together when we think about it. Anything else?
That really depends on how your sources are, but the idea of your expenses should never be above 30%. And what I find often is people are under investing in their business, that they're spending 10% on all of these categories, and especially for newer agents, and they're living on the rest. And they feel like I can't possibly afford to hire an assistant because I don't have enough. It's not that the business doesn't have enough. It's that you are stealing from your business for your personal lifestyle. So understanding if you're spending above 30%, figure that out. And if you're spending below 30%, you are not investing properly in your business.
Yeah. So we talked about business finances. Here's some of the things that we would think about with personal finances. One, as you're going into 2026, have these metrics for your household budget. What is my survival number? What is my stability number? What is my success number? Do not base that on what you hope your business is going to do next year, or like you went to a rah session, you got really fired up, you set a new business goal, and you left there setting that business goal and went out and leased a BMW. Not the right way to do it, right? But knowing what is my break-even survival number, what would be the number that would create stability, which is where I'm doing the things that I want to do sometimes. And then what would your success number be if you're living the kind of life that you want to live? This isn't that you went out and bought a jet, but this is your success number. Having those 3 numbers and figuring out a path between each of them makes a difference. And then Katrina, you were mentioning reserves earlier. What are your thoughts here?
I think everyone needs to know what their nut is. And the nut is, what does it take to feed my family, my bare minimum expenses? If, we stopped going out to eat, we canceled the streaming devices, you still need to eat, you still need to pay your heat, you still need to pay your mortgage or your rent, whatever that is. What's that number? And then everyone should have that number in reserves. at least 3 months, and getting to the point that you've got 6 months is where your family then, if something was going to go sideways, your family has time to figure it out. But for a lot of people, this number is psychological. I was speaking with an agent who grew up very, very poor, was homeless for a time, and now has a very big business. And this particular person is very nervous about spending money and getting to the point that, like, really being worried about getting back to where they were previously. So at that, we decided 12 months reserves is what he really needs. He really needs 12 months of reserves for psychologically for him to feel like he can go out and take other risks with money. Because he figures if real estate shut down completely, that he could go out and figure out how to support his family in the next 12 months. So having that 12 months of reserves in simply a high yield savings account might not be the most efficient investment, but it allowed him psychologically to take the rest and go invest it in much higher risk places that could create greater reward.
Yeah. So 3 other things that I'd recommend from a tracking perspective when it comes to your personal finances. Probably the greatest thing that I ever did was I got into a habit because of a group called GoBundance of tracking my net worth. And it was a really discouraging thing to do at first. But if I had any recommendation, we are, towards the end of the month, a couple more days from now, you're going to be at the 1st of November. I would sit down with a Google spreadsheet, because who does not love a good spreadsheet? And I would make a list of every asset you have and every liability you have. A net worth tracker is nothing more than a list of all of our assets on a period of time, or a date and time, a snapshot, and all of our liabilities. So all of your assets, all of your debt, those are liabilities. And at the bottom of that number is your net worth. You might be like, but wait a minute, there's a negative in front of it. This spreadsheet must be broken. No, it's not broken. It's actually totally normal. And most of us at some point in our life are going to have a negative number. Maybe you took on a whole bunch of school debt or whatever it might be. But all of your assets minus your liabilities is a net worth. And we have been regularly tracking that every 30 days for, 5, 6, maybe 5, 6 years, maybe longer now. Probably the best number that we track. Number 2, start to track your income by source. Passive income, or we could say income made by good decisions. You took some money, you invested it at some point. It is now money creating more money for you, versus active income, what you're doing. By the way, I would take a fraction of passive income and I would celebrate that over a much bigger number in active income. And the last thing that's kind of related to that is checking your passive income as a percentage of your household expenses. So if you know what your survival or your stability number is for your household budget, and you start to track what percentage of that is covered every month by my passive income. That number, it might feel really small right now, but what if next year you're able to move the needle a little bit, and in 2027 you can move it a little bit more? That is like a freedom number. How much money am I actually making for my passive income that would help to offset? Like, that's when you get freedom to do whatever you choose. Any comments there, Katrina?
You nailed it.
All right. Okay. By the way, tons of things that you could be looking at. Where does this one come from? Boy, a bunch of zeros. I'm pretty sure this one comes from Kubera. Let me see. Yeah. So there's a few different systems right now. If I was choosing one right now, I'd be looking at Kubera, or I'd be looking at Monarch as net worth trackers. They automatically pull in almost everything now from obviously your bank accounts, but also real estate investment. Some of them will mark them to market. Maybe they'll pull an automated valuation. Some of them will they'll pull from Bitcoin. They'll pull from crypto accounts. They'll pull from a whole bunch of different sources, and they'll track it, and they'll send you an email every day about it. Now, remember what we said at the very beginning. If you want to be intentional about something, go analog. So these are digital ways to do it, and it'll make it easy. Honestly, I've used them, and then for a while I stopped, and I went back to, like, I want to look at the accounts every 30 days, and I want to force myself to do it.
Some of the most people I know do that they actually sit down and they do that themselves.
Yeah. Other stuff. So we've talked about business tracking. We've talked about lead generation, metrics for your business, talked about some financial tracking. Other metrics that we focus on, personal tracking, right? What are some of the numbers that you want to track inside of your own life? Our very first comment here was like a number that Katrina is super, super proud of because she's crushed it is, what did you say? Almost wait, 1,300 or 1,400?
Almost 1,400 days. Yeah.
Almost 1,400 days of 10,000 steps a day, right? A huge success. That is a health goal that is tracking. And now it's just a thing of, did I check it off every single day? An awesome streak. So what are the health goals that you want to track? What are the personal growth goals? What are the family goals? It might be number of family dinners a week. There's another way to think about this with, what are the amount of days that you want to track that you're actually taking an entire day off with your family, right? Family days, game days, preparation days, a day that you're taking by yourself, preparing for your business, personal days. What are the things that you're tracking? Here's a tracker that we started using, my wife and I, on, we would make categories of things we care about. So personal, relationship, career, vacations, personal growth. And then we would write down, and sorry, you can't see this, but hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually, so on and so forth. And we would say, what would be an example of an annual family goal that we would have? And we would say, well, that would be like a family trip we wanted to take. So we would think for 2026, what's going to be our annual family goal? And we'd put something in there. But honestly, what's another example of a weekly family goal? And we would put something in that box. It became a game of bingo for us of filling out what are some different habits we want in different areas. And here's what we found. You might find the same thing. Well, there would be some categories where we would have entire columns that were blank. And it might be like the friend column. We'd be like, man, we really are lacking some goals in the friend column. Or maybe different seasons for us where the relationship column, the column would be blank. That's a great indication of like, hey, work on filling out the column. But there also could be some of us that we'd say like, wow, I've got a bunch of annual goals, but I have no daily goals. What are the goals that you could set every single day in your health, or every single day in your career, every single day in your finances? What are small little wins? Or you might be the opposite, where you're really good at setting a daily or a weekly goal, but when it comes to quarterly or annually, you have no idea. It just really shows it on one screen. Katrina, I mean, we've done this with some of our in some of our masterminds. Any ahas you've had when you've gone through that?
Yeah, no, I think it really shows you exactly what you just said of what column, what areas am I lacking, and how do I focus on that? And sometimes you might decide, all right, I got little babies and a big business that like my friends, I'm going to have a monthly, but I certainly could not have a weekly time with my friends. Sometimes it's okay to not have a goal in a particular category, but make the decision that you're not going to have it instead of just not having it.
Maybe just make a monthly one instead. You're like, this is a season where it's not weekly, it's going to be monthly, right?
Yep.
So there you go. Y'all, here's our contact information. We'd love to hear from you. If there's something that we talked about on here, like I'd really love to double click on that and go deeper. The reality is Katrina and I are getting back into a season, right? We're putting some goals down where we want to do more of these. And there's really a couple of reasons. One, we get to travel to a lot of conferences, and we would not be where we are if it were not for our friends and colleagues around the country that have poured into us. This is an opportunity for us to give back in that capacity. And number two, we're so honored at the agents that call Keller Williams Gateway home. And we are really wanting to create resources to help our agents succeed and grow. And so we hope every one of our agents watches this and helps work on your business for 2026. Katrina, you get the last word. Anything you want to add?
Thank you so much for being with us. And we believe life gives to the giver and takes from the taker. And we just want to give as much as we can. And if there's a topic that you're like, hey, I feel like you guys might know about this. I know Seth has friends on here. I have friends on here. Like, I would love for you to dive deeper into X, Y, or Z topic. Please let us know. We love kind of getting on here and sharing with everyone.
Yeah. All right, guys. Take care.